Page 505. Transformation of sentences. General introduction. Transformation means change of form. In grammar, transformation of sentence refers to change of a sentence from one form to another without changing its meaning. It can be done either by interchanging the forms of sentences or by conversion of sentence pattern. Transformation by interchanging the forms. 1. Voice change, active to passive and vice versa. 2. Narration change, direct to indirect and vice versa. 3. Interchange of parts of speech. 4. Change of degrees of comparison. 5. Affirmative to negative and vice versa. 6. Interrogative to assertive and vice versa. 7. Exclamatory to assertive and vice versa. 8. By using infinitive, gerund, and participle. Transformation by conversion of sentence pattern. 1. Simple to complex. 2. Simple to compound. 3. Complex to simple. 4. Complex to compound. 5. Compound to simple. 6. Compound to complex. In your syllabus for class 11, almost all types of transformation except interrogative to assertive and vice versa have been included. Different types of transformation. Simple, complex, compound. A. From simple to complex/compound. Example 1. His company made her supremely happy. Worked out. It was his company that made her supremely happy. 2. Leela keenly examined the ball for traces of the moon. Leela keenly examined the ball while she searched for traces of the moon. 3. It gave her great joy to play the teacher to Siddha. She would play the teacher to Siddha, and this gave her great joy. 4. She had a box filled with catalogues, illustrated books, and stumps of pencils. She had a box which was filled with catalogues, illustrated books, and stumps of pencils. 5. She insisted upon having his company all her waking hours. She insisted upon having his company all the hours she would be keeping awake. 6. The thought of Siddha made her panicky. It was the thought of Siddha that made her panicky. 7. But that good fellow, though an adept in controlling the moon, was utterly incapable of plying the pencil. Although that good fellow was adept in controlling the moon, he was utterly incapable of plying the pencil. 8. After her meal, Leela refused to go to bed. Leela refused to go to bed after she had finished her meal. Page 506. Example 9. The fellow with his knowledge of the household might come in at night and loot. The fellow who had knowledge of the household might come in at night to loot. 10. He has been in jail half a dozen times for stealing jewelry from children. He has been in jail half a dozen times as he was accused of stealing jewelry from children. 11. The police know his haunts. The police know where his haunts are. 12. His wife addressed him with a few words on his treachery. His wife addressed him with a few words, and it was on his treachery. 13. A few days later, putting her hand into the tamarind pot in the kitchen, Leela's mother picked up the chain. A few days later, when Leela's mother put her hand into the tamarind pot in the kitchen, she picked up the chain. 14. The mirror was obviously made in India. It was obvious that the mirror was made in India. 15. Outside the waiting room. 15. Outside the waiting room, Sir Mohanlal's luggage lay piled along the wall. Sir Mohanlal's luggage was outside the waiting room and it lay piled along the wall. 16. On a small grey steel trunk, Lakshmi, Lady Mohanlal, sat chewing a betel leaf. On a small grey steel trunk, Lakshmi, who was Lady Mohanlal, sat chewing a betel leaf. 17. She wore a dirty white sari with a red border. She wore a dirty white sari which had a red border. 18. The coolie flattened his turban to make a cushion. The coolie flattened his turban as he wanted to make a cushion. 19. Her husband never had any time to spare for her. Her husband never had any time that he could spare for her. 20. These nocturnal visits had, however, borne no fruit. These visits that he made at night had, however, borne no fruit. 21. Lakshmi found herself facing an almost empty interclass zenana compartment next to the guard's van at the tail end of the train. Lakshmi found herself facing an almost empty interclass zenana compartment which was next to the guard's van at the tail end of the train. 22. She got up, still licking the stone of the pickled mango. When she got up, she was still licking the stone of the pickled mango. 23. The arrival of the train did not disturb Sir Mohanlal's sang-froid. The train arrived, but it did not disturb Sir Mohanlal's sang-froid. 24. In his 5 years abroad, Sir Mohan had acquired the manners and attitudes of the upper classes. When he stayed abroad for 5 years, Sir Mohan had acquired the manners and attitudes of the upper classes. 25. His heart warmed at the prospect of an impressive conversation. His heart warmed as there was the prospect of an impressive conversation. 26. He went about his business with an expressionless matter-of-factness. He went about his business and there was an expressionless matter-of-factness in him. 27. Sir Mohan's thoughts were disturbed by the bearer announcing the installation of the Sahib's luggage in a first-class coupe. Sir Mohan's thoughts were disturbed by the bearer who announced the installation of the Sahib's luggage in a first-class coupe. 28. He stared at the lighted windows of the train going past him in quickening tempo. He stared at the lighted windows of the train which was going past him in quickening tempo. 29. Language has an important place. Language has a place which is important. 30. At 7:15 on the next morning, Jimmy stood in the warden's outer office. It was 7:15 on the next morning when Jimmy stood in the warden's outer office. 31. Disregarding the song of the birds, the waving green trees, and the smell of the flowers, Jimmy headed straight for a restaurant. Jimmy disregarded the song of the birds, the waving green trees, and the smell of the flowers and headed straight for a restaurant. Page 507, 32. A week after the release of Valentine, 9762, there was a neat job of safe burglary done in Richmond, Indiana, with no clue to the author. A week after Valentine 9762 had been released, there was a neat job of safe burglary done in Richmond, Indiana, with no clue to the author. 33. The losses were high enough to bring the matter up into Ben Price's class of work. The losses were so high that the matter was brought up into Ben Price's class of work. 34. Jimmy, looking like an athletic senior just home from college, went down the board sidewalk towards the hotel. Jimmy, who looked like an athletic senior just home from college, went down the board sidewalk towards the hotel. 35. The next morning, Jimmy took breakfast at the Adamses. It was the next morning when Jimmy took breakfast at the Adamses. ADAMSES. 36. He was going to Little Rock that day to order his wedding suit. He was going to Little Rock that day as he intended to order his wedding suit. 37. I was surprised in the West to see so many young boys and girls given to drugs. In the West, I was surprised as I saw so many young boys and girls given to drugs. 38. The greatest destroyer of peace is abortion. It is abortion that is the greatest destroyer of peace. 39. She died with a smile on her face. When she died, she had a smile on her face. 40. Some time ago in Calcutta we had great difficulty in getting sugar. Some time ago in Calcutta we had a great difficulty, and it was in getting sugar. 41. Man apprehends the world with his mind and senses. It is man who apprehends the world with his mind and senses. 42. I often see our educated men advertise their devotion to art by showing framed pin-ups side by side with good paintings. I often see our educated men who advertise their devotion to art by showing framed pin-ups side by side with good paintings. 43. The roots of art education lie in the observation of nature. It is in the observation of nature where lie the roots of art education. 44. It should provide the students with time and the environment to get acquainted with nature. It should provide the students with time and the environment so that they can get acquainted with nature. 45. Training in drawing will develop their powers of observation. It is training in drawing that will develop their powers of observation. 46. To get students into an encounter with nature, we should hold seasonal festivals, including displays of the season's fruits and flowers. We should hold seasonal festivals, including displays of the season's fruits and flowers, so that we can get students into an encounter with nature. B. From complex to simple/compound. Example 1. Siddha was hanging about the gate at a moment when Mr. Shiva Shankar was standing in the front veranda of his house, brooding over the servant problem. Siddha was hanging about the gate and at that moment, Mr. Shiva Shankar was standing in the front veranda of his house, brooding over the servant problem. 2. As Siddha opened the gate and came in, Mr. Shiva Shankar subjected him to a scrutiny. Opening the gate, Siddha came in and Mr. Shiva Shankar subjected him to a scrutiny. 3. Siddha was given 2 meals a day and 4 rupees a month, in return for which he washed clothes, tended the garden, ran errands, chopped wood, and looked after Leela. Siddha was given 2 meals a day and 4 rupees a month for washing clothes, tending the garden, running errands, chopping wood, and looking after Leela. Page 508. 4. Leela would cry and Siddha had to drop any work and run to her as she stood in the front garden with a red ball in her hand. Leela, standing in the front garden with a red ball in her hand, would cry, and Siddha had to drop his work to run to her. 5. If you stand on a coconut tree, you can touch the sky. You can touch the sky by standing on a coconut tree. 6. She was at his side when he was working in the garden or chopping wood and accompanied him when he was sent on errands. She was at his side at the time of his working in the garden or chopping wood and accompanied him on his errands. 7. As Siddha came in, Leela's mother threw a glance at him and thought the fellow already looked queer. Siddha coming in, Leela's mother threw a glance at him and thought the fellow already looked queer. 8. She had to go back into the kitchen for a moment because she had left something in the oven. She had left something in the oven and for this she had to go back into the kitchen for a moment. 9. It seems he is an old criminal. He seems to be an old criminal. 10. From the description I gave, the inspector was able to identify him in a moment. From my description, the inspector was able to identify him in a moment. 11. The inspector was furious that I didn't consult him before employing him. I didn't consult the inspector before employing him, and for this he was furious. 12. Siddha is gone because he wouldn't be allowed to sleep inside the house. Siddha is gone for not being allowed to sleep inside the house. 13. As soon as he had gone, she hailed a passing railway coolie. He went and immediately she hailed a passing railway coolie. 14. She emitted a long, loud belch as she went to the public tap to rinse her mouth. Going to the public tap, she emitted a long, loud belch to rinse her mouth. 15. He never showed any sign of eagerness to talk to the English as most Indians did. Unlike most Indians, he never showed any sign of eagerness to talk to the English. 16. He would fold it in a way. 16. He would fold it in a way in which the name of the paper was visible to others. He would fold it in a way just to make the name of the paper visible to others. 17. His face lit up as he saw 2 English soldiers trudging along, looking in all the compartments for room. He saw 2 English soldiers trudging along, looking in all the compartments for room, and his face lit up. 18. Sir Mohan decided to welcome them even though they were entitled to travel only second class. They were entitled to travel only second class, but Sir Mohan decided to welcome them. 19. There the warden handed Jimmy his pardon, which had been signed that morning by the governor. There the warden handed Jimmy his pardon, signed that morning by the governor. 20. He said he had come to Elmore to look for a location to go into business. In his words, he had come to Elmore to look for a location to go into business. 21. That would be the first time he had left town since he came to Elmore. Since his coming to Elmore, never before had he left the town. 22. He told the teller that he didn't want anything. He didn't want anything, and he told the teller that. 23. We pray this prayer every day after Holy Communion because it is very fitting for each one of us. We pray this prayer every day after Holy Communion, and it is very fitting for each one of us. 24. He proclaimed very clearly that he had come to give the good news. He had come to give the good news, and he proclaimed this very clearly. 25. They are hurt because they are forgotten. They are forgotten, and for this they are hurt, H-U-R-T. 26. Even if a mother could forget a child, I will not forget you. A mother may forget her child, but I will not forget you. Page 509. 27. From the time I have come here, I have simply been surrounded with love. I have simply been surrounded with love from the time of my coming here. 28. I had most extraordinary experience with a Hindu family that had 8 children. I had the most extraordinary experience with a Hindu family having 8 children. 29. I did not bring more rice that evening because I wanted them to enjoy the joy of sharing. I wanted them to enjoy the joy of sharing, so I did not bring more rice that evening. 30. And I know well that you have not given from your abundance. You have not given from your abundance, and I know that well. 31. When I pick up a person from the street hungry, I give him a plate of rice. At the time of picking up a person from the street, hungry, I give him a plate of rice. 32. And the only companion that he enjoys is smoking. He enjoys smoking as his only companion. 33. Among those things that man has devised to acquire knowledge or seek inner delight with, language has an important place. Man has devised many things to acquire knowledge or seek inner delight with, and among those, language has an important place. 34. They have their own specialities of expression as literature has its. Like literature, they have their own specialities of expression. 35. But the provision that our universities make for this is sorely inadequate at present. But the provision made by our universities for this is sorely inadequate at present. 36. Because our eyes are untrained, we have remained ignorant and insensitive to the glory of our past painting, sculpture, and architecture. Our eyes are untrained, so we have remained ignorant and insensitive to the glory of our past painting, sculpture, and architecture. 37. This is essential for the town dweller though for the rural boys pointing out may be enough. This is essential for the town dweller, but for the rural boys pointing out may be enough. 38. Each student should participate in it devotedly with something he has made with his own hand. Each student should participate in it devotedly with something made with his own hand. C. From compound to simple / complex. Example. 1. Leela, their 5-year-old daughter, came out, looked at Siddha and gave a cry of joy. Leela, their 5-year-old daughter coming out, gave a cry of joy on looking at Siddha. 2. Leela would cry and Siddha had to drop any work he might be doing and run to her. When Leela would cry, Siddha had to drop any work he might be doing to run to her. 3. She flung the ball at him and he flung it back. She flung the ball at him which he flung back. 4. Siddha clutched the ball, closed his eyes for a second and threw the ball up. Clutching the ball and closing his eyes for a second, Siddha threw the ball up. 5. Now this has touched the moon and come. Now this has come after touching the moon. 6. He covered the ball tightly with his fingers and allowed her to peep through a little gap. He covered the ball tightly with his fingers to allow her to peep through a little gap. 7. At dusk he carried her in and she held a class for him. When at dusk he carried her in, she held a class for him. 8. She pitied him and redoubled her efforts to teach him. Pitying him, she redoubled her efforts to teach him. 9. Leela would drop the pencil and run out of the room and the school hour would end. When Leela would run out of the room dropping the pencil, the school hour would end. 10. He sat down on the floor near the bed and told incomparable stories. He sat down on the floor near the bed to tell incomparable stories. Next, page 510, continued.